The Sportster, the last American motorcycle made in America. Prove me wrong. Let's go for a ride, and I'll explain what I mean. And then you can tell me what you think in the comments below. Well, it's another beautiful day. Finally got my dead cat windscreens in, and we're going to go on to the interstate and see how they work. I made the statement that the Harley-Davidson Sportster is the last American motorcycle. Need to qualify that a little bit. The last American old school motorcycle. Harley-Davidson Sportster was introduced in 1957 to the public. In 1959, the Harley-Davidson Sportster XLCH was introduced. 63 years later from the first introduction of the XL, and it's still being manufactured basically almost the same as it was the year it was introduced, with slight changes over the years. In 68, the XLH had electric start added onto it. In 72, they jumped to displacement from 900 cc's to 1,000. Of course, the 900 was really 883 cc's, but everybody back in those days called the Sportster 900, and then it was the Sportster 1000. There are other changes that were made through the years as well. Like I said earlier, the XLCH was introduced in 1959. Higher compression motor than the XLH, but basically, it was set up just a little bit different than the XLH. The original first Sportster that came out had a 4.4 gas tank, similar to the 4.5 gas tanks of the Harley-Davidson Sportsters that we had from around 2000, I believe, 4 up until this year. And during the 60s sometime, both models, the XLH and the XLCH, I don't know what year exactly, but were both donning the little peanut tank. So the electric start was introduced to the Sportster on the XLH, and that made a big distinction between the XLH and the XLCH from then on until 1979. That XLCH was kickstart only, the XLH was electric start only. Of course, they had kits that you could, options where you could put a Kickstarter on the XLH, but the XLCH had only a 20-year run. Other changes besides that happened in 72 was the increase of engine size to 1,000 cc's, was slight changes, variations in the frame, and then there was a more major change in the frame in 1978 and a half on the 1979 models, where the XLH and the XLCH and the XLS all got the same frame that was on the CR1000 that was introduced a couple years before then, the Cafe Racer. But basically, everything was still pretty recognizable. The Sportster was the Sportster. And then we had more changes come along with the introduction of the 883 again, the Evolution motor. And then shortly after the 883 was offered, The 1000cc Sportster was bumped up to 1100. And then finally the 1100 was bumped up to 1200, which made it as big as the biggest Harleys they were offering all through the 60s and 70s. The FLHs, the FLs. But still, no real major changes. You know, the basic Evolution motor is still the motor that they have now. And what is evolutionary about the Sportster motor from 80, what was it, 86 up to now, is that they done away with the iron head and went to aluminum. The next major change, other than the Evolution motor, was a change of frame again in 2004 when Harley-Davidson introduced the rubber-mounted Sportster. So, reality, someone that had a Sportster, let's say in 1958 or 59, saw a Sportster of today, that they would definitely see that it was a Sportster. They'd probably, some things they would like, some things they might not like. The old XLCH they had, for up until a point, had magneto, you know, had a magneto producing the electricity on it. That's the reason those XLCHs are so popular in making choppers, because you can make a chopper without having a battery. The Harley-Davidson Sportster is the longest production model that Harley-Davidson offers. Not saying that the new motorcycles are not real motorcycles. When it comes to people that think about being old school, new school, whatever in the world that means, if you want to be riding old school, you go into a Harley-Davidson dealership, then the most logical choice would be to buy a Sportster. Of course, I don't really understand this old school, new school attitude. I was listening to a YouTuber, he was a sport bike rider, and he was calling old school riders and new school riders. I don't really understand what he means by rider, because myself, I don't ride a motorcycle, I operate a motorcycle. I don't consider myself riding, I consider myself operating. I am a motorcyclist, not a rider. You ride a horse, you know. Your lady sitting behind you on a bike, she's a rider. You ride a bus. If you're on a bus, you're a rider. But if you're operating a motorcycle, you're a motorcyclist. And I really don't understand the terms of how everything morphed over the years. Of course, I am getting a little long in the tooth, because I still feel pretty young. If you want to ride a real motorcycle, there's basically 3 motorcycles in the world out there that you could be riding to say that you're kind of old school. That'd be the Harley-Davidson Sportster, and that'd be the Royal Enfield motorcycle, especially their 500cc single. It's been manufactured more or less in the same format ever since the 50s, based on a motor that was actually developed in the 30s. And there would be the Russian-made Ural motorcycle, the one that's known for the sidecar rigs, which was reversed engineered from the old BMWs that were made, that was designed in the 30s. Of course, they've upgraded it somewhat, but it's still, those are 3 motorcycles right there that if you were a person that rode every day and you wanted to be the person that did all the work on your motorcycle, fantastic time to be a motorcyclist. For some people, it's scary time, especially with the introduction of electric motorcycles. People can't understand why people would go that way. But technology advances. We don't have to always accept it. And take a cruise through the park. I don't know how well my vocals are going over, but this is a continued test of equipment as I try to become a motor vlogger, a YouTuber. Really trying to develop content, how I can keep people interested. But I'll take a cruise through the park. A lot of what people like about motor vlogs is they want information about how to do things or test drives of newer motorcycles. Unfortunately, I do not have the access to a lot of different motorcycles to do reviews. Personally, I like what's called the mid-range size motorcycles more than anything else. And I like the motorcycles that are more traditional, what we used to call standard. Like this term, calling certain motorcycles cruisers, I'm really trying to figure out when did that terminology pop up. I'm assuming that it happened during the 80s. I used to be a person that went and bought all the different motorcycle magazines and read all the reviews on the new bikes and made sure I always got the newest buyer's guide that listed all the motorcycles. Used to try to keep up with all the new trends and such. But I know when I first got into motorcycling, and I used to go buy the buyer's guide every year. They were divided basically in three types of motorcycles. There's a street, dirt, and dual sport. And basically, you know, we had a standard motorcycle. You know, a dual sport motorcycle was what we used to call street and trail. And then there was the all dirt motorcycle, which was used for racing, mainly motocross and hare scramblers and of that sort. But as time went along, come in the 80s, especially mainly the Japanese motorcyclists start putting out all the race replicas, which were actually sort of evolution of the cafe racer type motorcycles. Then they started dividing up the different street bikes. You know, there was the standard bike, and then there was the sport bike, and then they kept subdividing through the years. It's like I posted a picture of my bike on a site, and someone mentioned they called my Sportster a cruiser. Well, my Sportster to me is not a cruiser. It's a standard motorcycle. It sets up high. It's got an aggressive stance to it, being an XLS. And I really don't understand why one would consider this a cruiser. It's different than, say, the Iron 883s and the Customs. And it's more, you know, it's got more of a sporty stance, even though it, you know, it will not keep up with the modern sport bike or the race replicas for sure. But it's more in the style of a standard motorcycle that's more related to the old cafe racers than it is a cruiser, you know. Of course, like I said, I don't really like the word cruiser. I like the word street bike, dirt bike, dual sport bike, race replicas, cafe racers. But yeah, a little cruise through the park. But personally, myself, a lot of the reviews I see people doing of bikes are people that started riding, let's say they're young enough to be my children, some of them my grandchild. And the world of motorcycling has changed somewhat. The only thing is, we're not getting enough young people into it to keep it going. And I really believe that is because we've got this idea everything has to keep getting bigger and faster, and you know, which makes it more expensive and harder for younger people to get into the sport, even though there's a lot of great deals out there on used motorcycles if you really want to get into sport of motorcycling. Everyone on two wheels has got my respect. We live in a great time for motorcyclists, and we need to have more choices for young people, and we need not to try to be elitist, you know. You should never be jealous of the man that can afford a better machine than you. And when you're the person that's got that better machine, you should never be judgmental and put another person down for the choices of motorcycles they have. Did I ever tell you? I love Sportsters. Yes, I do. Sad thing though, Sportsters don't get the respect they deserve, and I'm afraid that we might be seeing the last Sportsters being made. For 2020, Harley-Davidson, they only have 3 models: the Iron 883 and the Roadster. The 883, the 1200, and the Roadster. That's not good. Because if Harley-Davidson quits making the Sportster, that'll be the last of a long line of tradition of basic motorcycles. Without basic motorcycles, where will the motor company be? Anyways, I hope this test is going good. My random thoughts are my thoughts and my thoughts alone. You do not have to agree with me. Make comments below if you feel free to do so. If you want to see where my journey is going to take us, or take me, take us, please subscribe to my channel. Like the video, and we shall see.